So I think what we're going to experience, I hope you can't hear that crazy wind in the background, by the way. I think what we're going to go through is in basically now and also in the next like 10, 20, 30 years is there will be a new America picked. And really what America was the Qing Empire or the Sun Empire. You know, you can think the idea of the sun, it rotates, you know, we can see it circling us and it changes position every so often. So the Sun Empire will change every so often. If you look throughout history, you know, it was the Roman Empire, and at one time it was the German Empire, at one time it was the English Empire, and all these, you know, probably the Spanish Empire, and all these different empires, right? We're going to see a new empire come up, and the two obvious countries, of course, is Russia and China. We can already see they're essentially putting in, you know, a lot of policies and stuff to be a lot more long term, and these countries are more conservative. Of course, you're going to have a conservative country that will become the new empire because that is where stability is. And conservatism, just in a broad sense, I'm not talking about the conservative American Party or the conservative party in whatever country. I'm talking about just, you know, conservatism usually comes from that of hard work, of labor, of struggle. It is where you have to, you know, learn to feed yourself and learn to gain your own resources and craft the resources into things and learn to work and learn to do this stuff, right? It's not a luxury position, or it's not a luxury stance. If you look at, you know, China and Russia specifically, these countries came from a kind of communist background, and really all this communism is a phase. That's what people don't seem to understand, is that this is a phase of a country that it goes through. Now, or really in the past maybe 30 years even, places like Russia and China have finished the communist phase and they've entered the capitalist phase, right? And this is what America entered. America, I imagine, if you look at the history, probably had a communist phase. It wasn't called communism, but it was what is a communist phase? It is simply just when the country is working very hard. Everyone's working. Everyone is getting up early. Everyone is farming and mining and logging and processing those resources. It's when your country industrializes, right? So every country essentially is going through an industrialization, or has gone through an industrialization. Some of the third world countries like Africa, for example, currently China is industrializing Africa. There was a lot of infrastructure that the Europeans built, and the Africans, of course, do not know how to maintain that infrastructure. They are, you know, kicking out the Europeans, essentially the Afrikaners, the white settlers, and China is coming in. Of course, the kind of, I guess you would say, almost the funny thing is that, see, the Africans thought that the Europeans were bad, right? And they built all this infrastructure. They basically advanced all their IQ by probably 10, 20 points, you know, advanced the civilization by thousands of years. Oh, they're so bad. Well, the Chinese are slave masters. They don't care about the Africans, because the reality is they see the Africans for what they are, which is essentially just these low IQ tribal people that have lived on this, you know, great prosperous land full of resources for, you know, who knows how many tens, hundreds, even millions of years, depending on how long humanity has been alive, and they haven't really done anything with it. The Chinese understand that, and they don't care. As in, they don't care about the ethics or the morals per se of other people, you know, besides themselves. Of course, they they're much more family orientated. Well, you have the white Europeans who are much more, we try to give everyone rights and give everyone, moral. We used to give everyone morals and such, and give everyone kind of compassion and empathy and all these things. The Chinese don't give a fuck. They will treat these Africans like slaves, absolute slaves. They will work them to the bone, take every last little resource of Africa. And of course, Africa brought this upon themselves, because if you cannot defend yourself and manage your own country, then someone else will come in and do it for you. That's just the nature of this. So essentially, China being the manufacturing major country of the world is going to have Africa under it, which is the resource country of the world. It kind of did this with Australia to an extent, trying to, because Australia is essentially like Africa. It's a subconscious southern continent, right? Full of resource. It's got its different climates and such. It is essentially very similar to Africa, you can think. It's done this to an extent with with Australia, where it's harvested resources and doing all this stuff and bought resources. Of course, because Australian people love money, Chinese people love money as well, but they also need resources. So this, I guess, we can obviously see the world splitting up into the NATO countries, which is Australia, America, Canada, Europe, and Japan, and the non-NATO countries, which is China, Russia, India, Africa, Southern America, basically the entire world except Europe and, the few first world, Canada, America, Australia, those few countries, and of course Japan. they got looped up into all this. We're going to see, of course, the splitting of these countries. Well, we're already seeing. I shouldn't say we're going to. We have already been going through this. That's the thing. We can't think of this stuff in future tense. This is what already has happened and already is happening, right? So there's going to be a splitting and a unifying of the countries within, the NATO regions and within the BRICS regions. That's the whole thing. Right? And the new sun will be crowned. The new America will be there, which is the main part of the video, really. Right? So I assume it's going to be, if I had to take a stab, I would say China. If I really had to take a stab. Because I wouldn't say Russia, because, I don't know. Just because, look, I don't know. Could be Russia. It could be because, here's the thing, Russia kind of has China. So China takes resources from Australia and Africa, right? And to some extent, so you can think, so maybe India is below China, but maybe Africa is below India in the hierarchy, you can think, something like that. And then Russia is above China, kind of in the hierarchy, almost. So, but the thing is, what I mean by above is that Russia's full of very intelligent people. They have the best programmers and some pretty good scientists in Russia, but they don't have the manufacturing force that China has. While China may not be as good, with programming, and they're still pretty good. Of course, we all know about China being like the scientific capital of the world, because of all the work they've put into their study and such. But I kind of can't help but think that the economic power of China is what will drive it, and what pretty much puts you in the place of the sun, because it's who makes money. America used to be the money capital of the world. It traded with everywhere. It used to be, everywhere traded with America. And America was, the greatest. It was the richest and all this stuff. And now it's become decadent because it went through its capitalistic cycle, and then it went through a kind of decadent cycle, decadent era. As I said, communism is just a phase of a country. Capitalism is just a phase of a country. And then the decadent era where everyone is kind of fat and lazy, and they start to, talk more about social issues and politics. When the average person is talking about social issues and politics, they probably have an easy enough life that they don't really have to worry about much. Physically, you could say. And here's the thing. China and Russia will go through that as well. Assumably, the same way that a bunch of immigrants wanted to come to America, wanted to come to Australia, UK, etc. These countries, when they were kind of taking off, probably a bunch of immigrants will want to come to China and Russia and whatever else happens to be the superpower. I really don't see it being India, just because a lot of India is like 1,000 or 2,000 years behind. If you really look at the rural areas, China has a rural area which is kind of old school, but they're still it's still kind of okay. They're still very good at what they do. They're still very good farmers and good at managing their resources and all this stuff. It's not like you just live in a mud hut with a cow. Like in India, it's absolutely not like that at all. But anyway, so you're probably going to have a lot of immigrants going to these countries in China and Russia, assumably, if this is all lining up, right? Meaning these countries are going to get diluted and they're going to eventually hit the decadent cycle, which the West did, right? The Jays, let's just say, the Jays are going to parasite these countries. Once they've harvested America and they've sent it all back to their little land in the desert, which they took from another country, they're going to start parasiting off China and Russia, and assumably the right-wing conservative great land of China and Russia and all these BRICS countries will eventually turn left-leaning. To get why? Firstly, because of decadence. The people will get fat and lazy and they will have too much pleasure and too much, all this bullshit, because it is through difficulty and struggle and pain and all these things and learning to be humble and work with the land and work with physical things and, live by nature that you become more right-wing, more conservative, more orderly, more family-orientated. Once these things are no longer a thing, once you have a bunch of Indians and maybe Africans doing all the labor, all the hard labor and work, and you sit there and the system takes care of everything, you're kind of not really a part of it. That's when people become jaded and they just spend all their time, watching television or talking about social issues on the internet, right? Then they will become probably, assumably, left-leaning. Now, will this really happen? I don't know. Here's the thing. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this isn't all just some cyclical thing where maybe Russia and China really is the new bastion, the new world, the new greatness. And we can just all move over there and just have a party, have a fun time, have a family, actually have a nice community, not have to worry about fucking schizos everywhere, drug addicts, all this kind of shit that we're dealing with in the cities, mentally ill people. But here's the thing, will our children be able to do that? Because that's what I see. all I see these countries as right now, Russia and China, and you know, all the other countries that are going to pop up and show themselves as these new Americas, because there's probably going to be a couple of them that have great financial prosperity. All I see it as that it's the same thing as the European immigrants wanting to say, oh, look at America, isn't that so nice? Look at Australia, these countries, so much money to be made there. And then eventually the Chinese and the Indians and, you know, some of the Africans come over to these countries then later on and like, oh, look at all this money. It's so much better than back home. You know, I can just parasite off these nice first world countries. That's how I see it as. I just see it as basically as that. Now, what's going to happen to the NATO countries? If, assumably, the BRICS countries are going to get too wealthy and too prosperous for their own good, and it'll probably, you know, human nature wins in the end. That's the thing. Will it though? Won't it? I don't know. Because it's like, you know, there's a point where we hit the golden land. We hit the golden phase of perfection. Everything's just beautiful for however long, you know. However long, not forever, but could it be forever? Could we live in a paradise? Or would that require eternal struggle? You know, would you have to move to a cold country where it's difficult and you have to have a family and you have to struggle and you have to, you know, be meticulous in all you do? So you never become a leftist, you know, cyber tranny of the future or whatever the fuck. People are, you know, becoming like a transhumanist tranny that has like 3 legs or, you know, an extra set of eyes or something. What happens to the West? You know, what happens to them? Well, one interesting thing is Japan was a pretty conservative country. They're kind of libertarian, actually. If you look at Japan, it's very business money. They're pretty free rules-wise because they're ethnocentric. You know, when you have everyone is like your race, you don't really have to worry too much about, you know, too many excess rules and nonsense and whatever. So they're pretty free, but they are fairly conservative. And what's happening to them is they're becoming more and more left-leaning, liberal. They're kind of getting infected by the LGBT, you know, Western social issue bullshit kind of virus mentality. So that's an interesting thing. But America is... So what I think they're kind of behind, they're a little bit like... While they are a NATO country, Japan, they're still in their like earlier phase and they're still kind of pure because they're racially pure. So they're going through their fall period. Japan's going through the fall, which the fall is the leftism. See, the leftism is the fall. The right is... You've lived through the fall, lived through the winter, the shit period, and then you're family orientated, you're physically strong and fit because you had to go through a lot of bullshit, you had to clean up a lot and fix a lot, and then it's the idea of the hard times create strong men. We have been going through, at least in America, Australia, assumably UK, Canada, we've been going through the hard times create strong men for maybe the last 5 years or something, right? And we've probably got maybe like another 5 years of it or something, or we're kind of heading, I don't know, maybe we're heading into strong men. We're heading into strong men create good times. Japan is in good times create weak men, right? Japan is in the good times create the weak men period. So they're behind because they held on for longer. But they'll also probably get through it quicker, would they? I don't know. I really don't know. Socially, Japan's an interesting place. I would assume they'll get through it quicker, but we'll see. And then you can look at Russia, which was they're in strong men. Maybe they're in like the strong men create good times period, right? Which is why I'm saying eventually after this it'll be good times create weak men for them. While they're in good times create weak men, we will be in the West, we will be strong men are creating good times, right? Because that's what I think is going to happen to the West. First world Western countries is that currently we're in a place where, you know, you go to like cities and you'll see mentally ill people fucking going crazy. I saw this woman, she's pretending she's a child and like on the ground just fucking crazy. And then you walk into a fast food place and you see some like 50, 60-year-old guy just yelling and screaming, homeless probably. It's like, what the fuck? And you see someone shooting up, you know, like heroin in the streets. Like, what the fuck? What the absolute fuck? Like, what? What happened to the, you know, honestly, at that point, you need hard discipline. You need hard rules, essentially. Hard laws and rules. That's really the only way you get rid of that. You can see that shit. Like, that's what we're going through right now. That is the West. And that's, you probably go to America, some of the places, you probably see homeless everywhere. People probably shitting in the streets. You know, it's like, at some level, you know, the ghettos of India, which is mud huts and cows, is probably better, and plastic all over the place. Maybe, because at least there you have a family structure. At least there, people are, you know, having families and getting on with their life and farming, and even though it's full of plastic and it's you're living in a fucking mud hut in, you know, a place where you probably don't even earn $1 a day, it's like, well, at least you have a functioning society there. We have a dysfunctional society here. And the dysfunctional society, I believe the young men now, the guys maybe 35 to 15-ish, give or take, are looking at this and thinking, you know, I don't want these fucking drug addicts in the street. You know, I don't want this limp-wristed society where people could just steal shit, and because it's not over like $1,000 or we're not allowed to stop them. Like, what the fuck? You know, I don't want this social dysfunction of people just pretending they're a giraffe and wanting rights to be a giraffe and not being functional as a human, you know, like, obviously replace giraffe with whatever gender or whatever, you know, pronoun or nonsense. The men now are looking at this, the strong men, of course, the men who are, you know, actively going to be the rulers of the future, because there's going to be a lot of men who won't. There's going to be a lot of men who either die, get caught into, you know, drug addictions, just become losers, burn out all their money and their life force. But the strong men are looking at this in the West, the ones that haven't moved over to, you know, other countries, because other countries, you know, as the same way that our forefathers, our grandparents or great-grandparents may have, or your parents even, may have moved to the first world Western country, escaping their homeland. We're kind of the ones who didn't do that are thinking, well, shit, we need to clean this place up. We need to fix this place. We need to improve it. Because we can't be living in a shithole. You know, this place is not going to last another generation if we don't make it, because it's, you know, the houses are too expensive, the young people, and because the houses are too expensive, no one wants to have families, and, you know, because there's all these weird gender nonsense, people aren't getting together and marrying and all this stuff. It's like, you know, basically the disease of the LGBT. That is a disease on society. Anything that stops people from being able to functionally have children and families is you know, it's a disease, you would think. We don't want this anymore. So what I see is that in these countries, which are currently, you know, it's like a good infrastructure shithole. So you can think about it. It's like nice infrastructure, and you've got all these ancient buildings which are built, who knows, 1,000 years ago, like all the churches and whatever the fuck they are. And then you got like third world street shitters and just mentally ill, people of that nation, like the white people, mentally ill people, just, and right next to like a 1,000-year-old church, which is, we can't even build that anymore. It's like the idea of the pyramids, we can't even build that shit anymore. And it's just, it's not gonna last. That's the thing. It's not sustainable. All this shit's not sustainable. That society is going through the hard times create strong men now, I think. And as the boomer generation dies, we will probably enter full swing strong men create good times, I think, in the West at least. In the other countries, probably they will enter good times create weak men. Who knows? I could be wrong. And maybe, Russia and China will be this eternal paradise, but I don't know, man. I just can't see it happening. It looks too good, it looks too good. If you look at videos of Russia, it's like there's hardly any people, like, drug addicts and just third worlders and just tents of homeless people. There's none of that. Maybe they don't show that. I don't know. Maybe there are some shitholes there. But it's like you got this nice, clean, functional place full of white people, and it looks like a paradise. Or even in like China, you got this like futuristic city. Everything is clean and efficient, and people are quick, and of course Chinese, a little bit socially rough, but it's very functional, very efficient, very functional, as Asian people are. It looks like paradises, and you got these nice rural villages, and the people, they still have family values and all this stuff. It's lovely, but for how long? Maybe when the sun sets for them, it will be a nice sunset. And it will be a nice, winter period. Who knows? The winter doesn't always have to be shit. And maybe I'm completely doing the wrong thing by staying in the West and staying in these shitholes. Maybe it's like I've got Stockholm syndrome. That's what I'm afraid of, is that I have Stockholm syndrome. The West is going to continue to be a shithole. These BRICS countries are actually going to be the future of basically right-wing, family values, conservative values, good places, and the West is just going to be this degeneracy where everyone's going to be a brown, rainbow-haired, homosexual, 300-kilogram miniature planet. Like that new game. I want to get it. Starfield. The NPCs in that game look so American, and it's disgusting. They look disgusting. If anyone's seen them, they're like so many different races combined in one. They're all fat. They're all ugly. They're all just awful. That's my fear, is that we just. But I guess at the end of the day, it depends on who rules the land, because that's, at the end of the day, that's how these things work. The people who rule the land, dictate the terms. So I think the thing we have to focus on is ruling the land, gaining power, conquering, and all this stuff, and then imposing our good values upon this place. I also don't think that everyone being, multi-gender, multi-racial, rainbow-haired ham planets is going to be sustainable very long, but who knows? When you print money, it almost seems like anything but can be sustainable, but it isn't. I don't know, rot. It's just this perpetual rot. Whatever. I'll end it here. You probably get the point. Yeah. I don't know. I figure you got your own thoughts on this. Maybe you know more than me. I don't know, man. Whatever. Let's, instead of hoping for a better future, let's create a better future.